Alright, so before we start on anything for this week, we're on the video 16 series here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the rest of this is going to work. I know there's a lot of things I haven't covered in CSS yet, but I wanted to cover them throughout the layout. So things like background images and images in general. I know you guys had some questions about that. There's also properties and values we haven't worked with. We haven't talked about grouping selectors or pseudo classes or links or all that stuff. I'm going to talk about that as I work through my layout. Reason being, I think it makes more sense if you guys watch me work through some issues. Maybe I'll run into some problems as I'm writing the code, and I'll show you how I decide to solve them. I think it just makes more sense for you guys to see it as I work through the layout. So if you are worried that there's some things we haven't covered yet, fear not. We're probably going to cover them here in the next couple weeks as we start wrapping up the class. I'm going to start here on my layout, and this week I'm going to talk about how to start your CSS file, a good place to start, and I'm going to cover background images and a few more things this week, probably the header and the navigation if we have some time. Alright, so let's continue. Alright, so let's go back here to my file here, and we'll take a look at what I have started. It's basically the same file we've been working on. I made a couple changes from the examples from before, but it's the exact same code, and I have all my content here. This is basically what I meant by gathering your content for last week's homework. Just all the actual content. I know my content here is fake, but gathering your actual paragraphs you want to write out, the links you want to think about, the images. So I have some images there. So get the real content for your site ready. You don't have to show it to me. I just wanted to get you guys prepped for this next stretch of stuff because I'm actually going to be building my layout. So I wanted you guys to build yours. So here's my CSS, and you'll notice I added a bunch of comments. This is how I like to organize my CSS. You don't need to copy me. I just like to separate things out so I know where things are. So, here's a comment. I just say like my main styles go here, and then my header starts here, my navigation, my main content, etc., etc., all the way down the page. I forgot my container, but I'll probably add that as well. How you organize it from here on out is really up to you. There's no wrong answer here. If you remember in the book, he had his own style of organizing his CSS in the order that they supersede each other in the cascade, so he knew where he was getting some errors. But this is how I like to do it. So whatever makes sense to you, you can copy me if you like. It's not a bad way to work. And we'll start adding some properties and values here. Alright, so let's talk about a good place to start for your CSS. I have my first couple of selectors set up here, which are the two that I like to start with on all of my projects. There's one here you probably haven't seen before. It's this little asterisk guy, and this is known as the universal selector, meaning that any properties and values I add to this guy are going to propagate down to every single element in the HTML. Okay, so I'm going to show you why I like to do this here. As soon as this video catches up here, I like to add a margin and a padding to this, and I'll let this catch up here, of 0 pixels on each one. So a margin of 0 pixels, so top, left, right, and bottom, all are 0, and a padding of 0 pixels, top, left, right, and bottom are all 0. Reason being that lots of browsers have margins and padding built into some of their elements or their bodies, and when you go to build your boxes, your divs, and any other elements that you add margins and padding to, you don't want to have to take into account their own margins and forget that they exist, and then it might mess up your layout in different browsers. So I just like to add this at the start of all my CSS files. It's a good place to start. The other thing is, if you remember from chapter 2 or 3 in the book that talk about the CSS, this universal selector comes last in the cascade in terms of importance, so everything else will override this. So anything we apply to any other elements in terms of margins and padding will override this universal selector. So that's a good place to start. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is the body. Now, if you remember from our inheritance videos, anything you put in the body gets passed down to all of the other elements. The body is like the ultimate parent of all the HTML elements. So there's a few basic properties and values that a lot of people like to use in their CSS for the body, and I'm going to show you some of the more general ones people like to use. Background color is one of them. Okay, and that's just the background color of the entire page. So if I go look at my page right here, That's the wrong logo, by the way, but it's all white. So I'm going to go ahead and make that white. Now I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk about hexadecimal shortcuts here. Because this is white and they're all F's and they're in pairs, right? FF, FF, FF. As long as the pairs are all the same for all three of them, all right? So if this one was even different, like 00, so if it was FF, 00, FF, as long as the pairs are all matching pairs, I'll change this one to 33 just to show you they could all be different. As long as they're all matching pairs, you can shorten this. Alright, so let's say my color was FF0011, I can change this to F01, okay? And it's the shorthand for FF0011, okay? So, just so you know, that's available to you as a shortcut. Now, since these are all FFFFFF, I'm going to shorten this to just FFF for my hex. Again, this wouldn't work if even one of the pairs was off. So if even one of these pairs was off and I were to say this one was 0F, you couldn't write FF0F for the last one, okay? So only if all three happen to be matching pairs, even if they're not the same matching pairs, can you do a shorthand for this, okay? So I'll change this back here to FFF, okay? And another common one is the background image for the entire page. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you what the value looks like for a background image, although I'm going to make the background image a separate video because that's a separate topic and we'll talk about that next. So here's what it would look like, just to give you guys a baseline, an idea of what this would look like. I'll just make up a picture here. It looks similar to like the href attribute or the source attribute, where you have what you're doing and the location of the file. And you could almost look at this and I guess moving on to the next one. I'll come back to that in a minute. Font family is another common one. So I'm going to add my fonts here. Sorry about that, I forgot what I did in the video because I record the video first and then do the voiceover. So here's my fonts. Okay, so I'm going to go with a sans serif family. Always end with the family type at the end, whether it's serif, sans serif, monospace, whatever you like. Okay. Another common one would be the font size. Okay, and we talked about this in a previous video, font families and font sizes. I'm going to make it 100% for my my body. You can make this a pixel size as well as your default size. If you remember the video on font sizes, I like to give things a percentage and then work off of that using M's. I like to work in pixels predominantly, but since the relative values are harder to understand, I'm going to work with the relative values just so you guys get a hang of it. And I might run into some issues with it, so we'll see. And hopefully we can figure them out. Alright, and the next one here, some people like to add line height, if all their line heights are going to match, or you can then change them off of this. I don't, but it's an option that people like to use sometimes. So the other one I'm going to give you is color for the font you're going to use, the main font you're going to use. If your main font is going to be black, it's default black, right? So that would be pound 000 for the shorthand for that. So I'll add that there since my main text will be black. Okay, so these are kind of like just your main general properties and values that people like to use for the body. You can use any property and value you'd like, but this is a good starting point, right? Everything else can be specific to the element that you need to make. And if anything needs to override these, they can, because the properties of the children elements will override the parent elements, right? So universal selector and body is where I like to start most of my CSS. And I'm going to make a video here for background images, and we'll talk about that next. Alright?